Welcome to the GMAT Strategy Podcast. You're here because you believe there's a better way to study for the GMAT, and so do we. We created the GMAT strategy to maximize your results and minimize your effort so you can get to the fun parts about business school and life as quickly as possible. My name is Isaac Puglia, and I've been teaching GMAT classes and tutoring privately for the GMAT for almost a decade, and I've achieved a 99th percentile score on the GMAT and helped thousands of students get into the business schools of their choice. I'm excited to be a part of your MBA journey since we all at TGS think our world can benefit from the best possible business leaders that we can find. If this show is bringing you value, please share it with your friends and family who are studying so that together we can make this process as easy and as painless as it can possibly be. Let's go.
Let's talk about how to start your GMAT studies in 2026. So we're getting a little ahead on this one, but just want to make sure all of you are starting off on the right foot and avoiding a lot of the incorrect and conflicting information that I find on the internet every single year when I'm preparing to do this episode. And I know a lot of you are making your plans for how you're going to attack this. Some of you are nearing the end of your studies, and I think you'll still find a lot of what I'm going to discuss today quite relevant. And if you're in the middle of the process, I'll be able to give you some tips that'll help as well. But for the most part, it's going to be about how to set the right foundation. And if you haven't had the right foundation and you're struggling, how to go back and reset that foundation properly. So for some of you, the GMAT is really going to be no big deal. And for others of you, it's going to be one of the most consequential challenges of your professional and academic life. Most of us are going to be somewhere between those two extremes. But suffice to say that getting the framework right from the start is incredibly valuable no matter where you are on that spectrum. So let's build that framework for you. First and foremost, I'm just going to talk through a broad overview of the steps we're going to go through, and then we'll dive into each one in detail so you can make good decisions. First, you're going to want to know a little bit about the format of the exam and the different question types, just in case you're brand new to the process. I'm going to go through that quite quickly, but the GMAT did just go through a big change a couple years ago, and the internet, the industry, and even some MBA programs are still catching up from that. So we're going to get you up to speed on those changes and how that's going to affect your process. Once you get up to speed on those basics, even if it sounds scary, you're going to want to take a baseline practice exam as soon as possible so that you can optimize your path to success. Then you're going to want to plan based on that first result. That usually includes selecting the best resources you can get and executing well on your study plan. And then you're going to retest to measure your progress and optimize from there. So again, that's just a broad overview of everything that we're going to talk about, what the process looks like end to end. And then we're going to dive into some details. At the end, I'm also going to give a few tips that are simple, but I think you'll find extremely helpful for getting results faster and avoiding some of the big pitfalls that people fall into, which is pretty much what happened to me back in the day, and it was awful and super painful. So going to do my best to save you from that. So let's start with a really, really quick overview of the format of the test. I'm going to keep this light just in case you've been studying for a while. And you're welcome to go deeper with any of the additional episodes I'm going to recommend here. So if you're very, very, very brand new to the GMAT, there's 3 sections. One's called quantitative, one's called verbal reasoning, and one's called data insights. Sorry, the first one's called quantitative reasoning. In the quantitative section, or what I'm going to call the quant section, there's only one problem type. It's a standard 5-option multiple choice problem type that you're probably familiar from tests in the past, and it covers math content up to high school geometry, but it doesn't include geometry anymore. That's one of the important adjustments to the recent exam that just came out a couple years ago. That's the quantitative reasoning. We'll talk more in depth about that in a sec. The verbal reasoning has 2 problem types. One's called reading comprehension, the other's called critical reasoning. It mostly just covers your reading skills as well as some logical reasoning, and more on that in a minute. The data insights section is exactly what you would expect. There's a couple different problem types in there, but we could pretty much split it into data sufficiency and then not data sufficiency. And what's being tested here is mostly your ability to decode charts and graphs. But it also includes some math and some logic questions that you can think of kind of like puzzles for now. I'm not going to go super in depth on those question types because I have in the past, and I'm going to reference those episodes, but that's the very, very, very broad strokes of what the GMAT is. I'm just going to mention that right now, and we'll link these below if you prefer to research deeper, but one's called GMAT Focus Quant, one's called GMAT Focus Verbal, and one's called GMAT Focus Data Insights. If you're struggling with any of those sections in your current prep process, or you feel like you want a little bit more robust beginning with those, highly recommend listening to those. I'll talk you through all the gory details of all those sections and what you need to know for each question type. But if you feel comfortable with that and you're looking more for the high level overview, that's what I'm going to focus on here in this particular episode. For now, just knowing that there's 3 sections and that if you have regulation time, meaning no special accommodation for learning differences, then you're going to have 45 minutes for each section. You'll get a 10-minute break that you can take between any of the 3 sections. Just as a quick side note, if you do have a documented history of learning differences, I encourage you to start the accommodations process as early as possible so that you can practice and take your baseline exam with the most realistic and the right timing protocol. If you qualify for those accommodations, you're probably already familiar with the approval process from past exams, but if not, a web search can help you out with that. And you can also reach out to us anytime if you get stuck in that process. You can reach us by DM at the GMAT strategy on current social channels, or if you prefer email, you can email us. We're contact, CONTACT, at thegmatstrategy.com. So if you have those learning differences and you qualify for those accommodations, you're probably already aware of that, but there is a process you can go through to get tested, and that's just going to go way beyond the scope of this episode. So like I said, reach out to us if you have specific questions about that. But with the practice test, for example, this is kind of more of a technical thing. If you do have those learning differences, it's going to be hard to adjust the time protocol without already being approved for the extended time. So again, you're going to want to get that rolling as soon as possible. And it can take a little bit of time for them to approve the file. It can take a while for you to collect the data. If you're getting tested or retested, it can take some time there. And if you want to get this done as soon as possible, then you really want to get ahead of that. Okay, so that's the basic broad overview of what the exam is. Let's talk about what a good score is. So if you want to go to a top 10 program, that used to be a 700 plus. That's on the old version of the exam, and those scores end in a 0. Now for the new GMAT that just came out a couple years ago, that's going to be a 655. Basically, the way the percentiles have broken down as of today in 2026, at the end of 2025 right now, going into 2026, new GMAT scores are 45 points lower than old GMAT scores. And this is important because on a lot of business school websites, they're still publishing averages and medians from the old score scale. And if you can't tell what's what, I'd encourage you to reach out to the schools you're interested in and see if you can get a straight answer on how they're computing their averages and their medians. But there's also quite a few schools who are making a push to use data from the new exam. And if you think about the position the schools are in, like it kind of makes sense because they admitted these people 2 years ago. These are like the very first people who were able to take the new version of the exam. And now those folks are finally in business school, finally like barely maybe starting to graduate from business school. These schools actually finally have a little bit of data that they actually can publish. But the past couple of years have been this kind of awkward transition period, and some schools are still trying to figure out how they're going to compute that data because the GMAT scores last for 5 years. That means someone who took the exam 4 years ago, who took the old version, can still apply with that old score scale score. So that can make it kind of difficult for schools to publish the median, publish the average, because it's a mix of the new score scale and the old score scale. So we're all just going to have compassion for each other in this situation and try to get through it together. But the new version of the exam is it's much shorter. It's designed to be more user-friendly. I think it's a win for everybody. And I'll reference and we'll include some specific episodes on that change itself, partly the ones I just referenced on Quant, Verbal, and DI, but there's also one called the Definitive Guide to the GMAT Focus Edition. And that's what the new exam was called for the first year that it was offered. So just to clear that up for you personally, you're going to hear a lot of people reference the Focus Edition, and they're talking about the new edition of the exam that currently exists. But GMAC, the people who published the exam, stopped calling it the Focus Edition, so now it's just called the GMAT. But if you hear the GMAT now and the GMAT Focus Edition, that's all the same thing now. If you see a score that ends in a 0, that's the old score scale and the old exam, slightly different format, slightly different question types. I'm not going to go super in depth on that right now because, again, I want to keep this high level and just give you the need to knows that as you're starting. I don't want you to get bogged down in like deep research on the differences between the exams. But basically, there's no essay anymore. There's no sentence correction anymore. And a lot of the materials, free and paid, that are from pre-2024, so 2023 and earlier, you're probably going to want to be skeptical of those. The problem solving and quant questions, those are still relevant. The data sufficiency questions are still relevant. And then all the other stuff from data insights, graphs and tables, two-part analysis, and multi-source reasoning, which you'll learn about as you progress, those are all still relevant. And then reading comp and critical reasoning are all still relevant. So you can still use a lot of that old exam material to study. You just want to make sure that you're crystal clear on the format and how it's going to show up. I'll help you get that knowledge in just a moment. I think that's probably everything we need to say about the new versus the old exam. But again, feel free to reach out to us if you're unsure how to handle your specific situation or your schools and what they're telling you. So a good score for a top 10 ranked program is going to be around that 655 level. Now, some schools are going to publish scores higher than that. Some schools are going to publish scores a little bit lower than that. And there's no one perfect score that I can tell you that's going to get you into business school, because the truth of this is, like, the GMAT doesn't really get you in. What gets you in is your story, the past, present, and future of what you're doing with your career and how that aligns with what kind of student the school is looking for. That's the stuff that gets you in. But the GMAT score could keep you out, and if it's not high enough. And so that's why we're here right now. Now, of course, if you're in a very specific situation, like you have a lower undergraduate GPA, or you have other concerns in your application, then a higher GMAT score can help with that. And of course, there's not much you're going to go back to do and change your GPA, but there's quite a bit you can do to improve your GMAT score in a relatively short amount of time, hence the importance of this exam. So it can be a good compensator, it can be a good help to the application, but I don't want to pretend that it's the be-all, end-all here, and that's why I'm just hedging my advice around what's a good score. Anything in that range is going to give you a shot at the programs you want to go to. And if you want just a quick shorthand, you'll hear this a lot, but it is true. And I agree, like, just checking out the median scores for your particular schools that you want to go to, that's a really, really good place to start to set a goal score. And then you can optimize from there. And I'll give you some advice for how to do that well in a second. Just going one step deeper than that, the individual scores matter. So the quantitative score, the verbal score, and the DI score, schools do look at those scores. So it's not just about that 3-digit overall score, although that's what you're going to hear discussed the most. And as of today, I would say that for a top school, you're going to want at least a 78 in all three sections. That's a good little shorthand. You could probably get away with a little bit lower, a little bit if in some sections, if your other section scores are higher. And I'm not going to get into the intricacies of exactly how the 3-digit score is calculated from the individual scores, but there's plenty of score calculators online that you can find if you want to play around with that a little bit. I think it's just not super relevant when you're starting out. You just want to have reasonable targets, and then you want to get in motion, and then you can refine this as you learn more about the process, learn more about the schools you want to go to, and learn about how difficult this is going to be for you personally. And I think each of us is going to discover that kind of on our own timeline. But I think 78 quant, 78 verbal, 78 DI, that's a good starting place to aim if you're going for a top-ranked program, let's say top 20. Outside the top 20, you can usually get in with slightly lower scores than this, so feel free to calibrate based on your goals. And 78 across the sections, that would get you somewhere in like the high 500s, low 600s, so like a 595, 605. That tends to be the low cutoff for the top schools. Like, you can still make a good case there, but the odds of success go quite a bit down the lower below 655 you go. And then the higher above 655 you go, the higher your odds of success. But like I said, like, it's not the be all end all. At that point, it's a little bit more about your story and how you present yourself and what you've done in your career so far, what you want to do. And again, how that overlaps with the school. Different schools are looking for different things. So again, that's a much deeper conversation that we've gone into in past episodes. So I don't want to go too far down that particular rabbit hole, but I do want to give you useful information, because when you're taking your baseline practice exam, you're going to want to compare the quant score, the verbal score, and the DI score to those like kind of 78 thresholds, because that's going to help you figure out which sections you need to invest more time and energy in, which ones might be more difficult for you to achieve the objective in, and which scores might be strengths. Like, maybe you're coming in much, much higher than that on a certain section and much lower than that on the other sections. That's still really, really, really useful data from that initial baseline test, because that's going to help you strategize. So if, let's just say you took a baseline test and you got 78 in every section, you can just work on the section that you personally feel is going to be easiest to move. So, like, thinking about your experience, like, okay, I feel like the quants section is really resonating with me. I feel like I'm underperforming there. I feel like there's a lot more I could learn and get better there. you can a lot of times just make your assessment based on that, um, and vice versa with the other sections. But if you do need help optimizing that after your baseline test, let us know. And again, always happy to advise to the extent that we can. Now, just to tie this off and make it really, really simple, higher is better in terms of admissions and odds of success, in terms of getting merit-based scholarships. But you do need to weigh the amount of time and energy that it would take you to get a higher GMAT score against the other things that you're going to want to accomplish in the application process, such as writing really compelling essays, thinking deeply about your own story, practicing your interview skills, maybe getting promoted at work or recognized at work. Those things can go a long way. Or maybe even shifting industries in the short term while you're trying to get ahead of maybe a shift you want to make in the MBA or post MBA. There's a lot of things that you can be doing right now beyond the GMAT to help yourself out. But I'm going to just focus on the GMAT here because I think that's what's going to be the most helpful for you. And that's generally the least understood part of the process, as weird as that might sound. On the surface, it looks like just any other standardized test, but it's definitely not. It's definitely its own game. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment. But as a good rule of thumb, if there's a lot of people, quote unquote, like you, who apply to the schools that you want to go to, and just to give an example, let's say you're in management consulting, you're a male, and you're applying to a school like Wharton or NYU or Columbia, there's going to be a lot of people like you applying to those schools. Whereas if you're a female school teacher applying to Wharton Business School, there's just not that many female school teachers who apply. And those are just the demographic facts of the situation. And if you're in one of those overrepresented categories, then sometimes it's helpful to have a slightly higher score than the median. But that's where an admissions consultant could help you figure that out. And again, more on that in a minute. So I'm just trying to contextualize like what higher is better means a little bit for your specific situation. But in general, regardless of what type of demographic you're in, if you got a good GPA from a strongly branded school, usually hitting the median score is going to be more than good enough to have really, really good odds of admission. Of course, nothing can guarantee that you're going to get admitted to a school. There's a lot of factors in that, but you'd have really, really good odds. If you're a rare breed at a particular program, then you might be able to get by with something a little bit lower than the median. So just helping you set that goal, helping you calibrate a little bit, and just setting you up with good context, because you're probably going to be bombarded with a ton of information as you go down this path toward GMAT success. And I just want you to have a good filter for that info. There's definitely a complex calculus when it comes to estimating odds of success. So back to the admissions consultant thing, there's tons and tons and tons of people in the admissions consulting space. These are people who help you with application essays. They help you with school selection. They help you with making your story more compelling, picking the right stories from your past and present career that can help you resonate with what the schools like to see. It's definitely an interesting business. And there's lots of great providers in that space who usually offer free consultations. And so I'd encourage you to do a handful of those as you're starting this off, get to know a couple people, build some relationships. It's not necessarily something you need to commit to right away, but if you find a good fit and you feel like you want that support throughout, then by all means, don't be afraid to commit to it. Tends to be an expensive service, but there are some alternatives out there that are more budget options, so it's worth exploring a little bit. And the reason I'm recommending that now is that can help you set your target score based on your demographic and your history. And that can help you just make a more realistic plan for what you're going to do as far as engaging with the GMAT goes. Now, just quick caveat there. A lot of folks who are in the admission space have brand partnerships with people who are in the GMAT space. So they'll often recommend their brand partner. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I think you just want to go into it with eyes wide open and know that it is not an unbiased recommendation. So just take that for what it is. Okay. I'm not saying it's not good advice. I want to be clear about that. But that's why you're definitely going to want to speak to at least 3 people if you're going to go down that path. Okay. So that's optional. But I have found it's really helpful for certain types of folks who want that clarity from the beginning. If you already know what you want to do and you've checked the median scores, and you've got your target GMAT score and you're ready to dive in, let's take those steps. So quick note on how the exam is scored, and circling back to what I was saying a moment ago about it being very, very different than other exams. Your GMAT score is not strictly based on accuracy. That is a little crazy to try to comprehend for most people. You do need to get questions right to get a high score, but the score is basically based on the difficulty level of questions that you're engaging with in the section. So it's a highly adaptive exam. It adapts after every question that you answer. If you get questions right, you'll usually see higher difficulty level questions. If you get questions wrong, you'll usually see lower level difficulty questions. But even that doesn't happen 100% of the time for some complex reasons. And the whole scoring algorithm behind the GMAT is a bit of a statistical marvel. And there's a lot to know there. And it usually doesn't translate super well to audio format. And so that's why we made a video detailing some of the key information that you're going to want to know as you're starting the process. That's on our website. It's free, and it's called How to Reach Your Dream GMAT Score in Half the Normal Time. So I'd encourage you to watch that when you're done with this episode if you're just starting out, or if you're struggling with your timing in this section and pacing the exam, and you're frequently running out of time. That can really, really help you out there. There's also quite a bit of additional advice there that goes into accelerating your progress that much, but I'll leave that for the video. So for now, the point I want to make about the scoring is it's not just about getting more questions right. Getting questions right is really helpful, but there's a trade-off of time, accuracy, and difficulty level that's much more complicated than traditional exams. And so that's why I'm encouraging you to do some research into the scoring and check out that video that we made for you that should help quite a bit. And this is all stuff that I just didn't know when I was back in your shoes. Gosh, I don't know, over a decade ago at this point for sure. Maybe 15, 20 years ago is when I first started studying for the GMAT. And it was just a really, really tough experience for me. My score went down multiple times. Picked the wrong provider multiple times. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Just terrible, terrible mistakes that are super avoidable. And if a resource like the one I'm making for you right now was out there, it would have saved me a ton of time. So just trying to pay that forward for you. So the scoring was one thing that I didn't realize, and that probably doubled the amount of time I needed to study for the exam. It was like super, super painful. So that's that. Let's get into steps that you can take. So first step, if you're ready to dive into a cold practice exam and you're okay just starting it up, taking it, seeing where you are, that is for sure the optimal move. And I strongly recommend doing that. Make sure it's a practice exam from MBA.com. It's easily searchable. It's currently, as of today, it's called the official GMAT starter kit. And there's 2 free practice exams in there. We'll link a link to that in the description of this podcast, but if it expires, just web search it and just take the exam. See where you're strong, see where you're weak. Don't worry too much about timing or like pre-learning anything. As soon as you can get that initial data, then you'll be able to optimize your path from here to where you want to be. Think about it this way. If you asked me what the fastest and most efficient route to New York City is from an unknown starting destination, how could I answer that question? I can't. It's impossible. It's madness. It doesn't work. So just make sure you know where your starting point is. That's going to heavily, heavily influence the next decision that you make. Now, I will say, if you're truly terrified of taking that baseline exam, that's very understandable. A lot of us have a lot of perfectionistic tendencies in this MBA path, and that's neither good nor bad. It's just learning about how to manage it, so it's not managing you. What you can do is you can start with that official starter kit, and they have some practice questions in there. And I would just start with them untimed. You can even web search them if you want a little bit of theory or a little bit of strategy around them. And those will give you an example of what's in those sections that I was walking through at the very beginning of the episode. But once you finish that initial starter kit at the maximum, I think there's about 90 questions in it. That's when you want to just get that cold baseline down, and just don't worry if it's not that great. Like, my starting score wasn't that great. 95% of people out there who take a practice test are somewhere around the median. It's not that pretty. It's not that good. It's a brand new thing. And it's like the first time I picked up a basketball. You know what I mean? It wasn't pretty, but the 7,000th time I picked up a basketball, things went a lot better. And it's definitely not that hard to get great at this exam as it is to like master a sport or master like your profession or something. It's somewhere in between that and no effort for most of us, but there are definitely people out there who are hyper talented test takers. And, if that's you, that's awesome. That definitely wasn't me. And perhaps obviously I found success with the exam. So even if you're not starting in a good place, the point I'm making is you can get there. You can get there. It's not about where you start. It's all about where you finish with the GMAT. And that's a good thing. If you're struggling, you can definitely check out the episodes that I mentioned, like the quant episode, the verbal episode. Those will help with some basic techniques, some basic theory, and a nice framework you can use to get good faster. But like I said, I really don't recommend going beyond that starter kit. If you're going to try to go through like an entire program without taking a baseline exam, I just haven't seen that end well. It usually leads to super dilated study timelines. It leads to burning months studying stuff that maybe you would have been supernaturally great at the beginning. And sometimes that can even make your score worse. And then you have to unlearn that stuff, and it's super, super ugly. And I work with people all the time who are having to unlearn stuff that they learned on their first program. And it's just really nice to avoid that. So that's why I'm being pretty heavy-handed with this advice about taking the practice test. So yeah, I mean, just speaking from experience, I let my own perfectionism and obsession kind of like get the better of me when I was first prepping. And it would have been great if I had been able to just like let that go, get around it, get over it. No one was going to see that first practice exam except me. It was like a crazy thing. You know what I mean? I'm like worried about what I think about myself. At the same time, it's totally understandable, and like our self-perception maybe is arguably the most important relationship we have. So just trying to be sensitive to that while at the same time like trying to be a good coach, a friend to you in this situation. I don't know what the right word is, but just like trying to like give you the real that's actually going to help. And of course, like we could have a long debate and conversation about perfectionism and obsession, and like it's amazing in some respects, and it can be like really self-destructive in other respects. And so I think it's just about learning how to use it to your advantage and not let it slow you down, if that makes any sense. So that's the first two steps. Understand the basics, take a baseline exam from MBA.com, and then you can start to optimize your path. So let's move forward with what that optimization function looks like. So let's say you got your baseline score. You can compare it to your median score for the schools you want to go to. You can see what kind of a gap you're trying to cover. And then further, you can gauge your performance against that kind of baseline 78 subscore in quant, verbal, and DI. If you're much, much higher than that in DI, you probably want to pick a course of study that's not going to focus on DI much. In fact, maybe you don't want to do any DI prep. Same thing if you're really high in verbal. If you're getting a 66 in DI, then you're going to want a program that really focuses on that, most likely. And there's some variance here, but I'm just talking in broad generalizations so that this is going to apply to every single one of you. And if you need more personalized advice, there's plenty of ways to get that. So once you've got that starting score, you can pick a good set of materials. And picking the right materials to study is very personal. It's going to be a combination of learning style, of budget, desired score gain, and your desired timeline. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk you through the basic available options in the industry, give you a broad level overview, and then I'm going to give you my personal opinion on what I often recommend the most for certain situations. But I do want to be clear, even though this is based on like a significant amount of data, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, most of this is just like my opinion. And so I'm not saying this is like the cold, that this is like objective truth, but it's as close to objective as I can possibly get as a human being. Okay. And I really do mean that. Yeah. So let's talk about your learning style. Based on your history, you want to think about where have you learned the most? Where have you learned the best? Do you learn the best from books and reading on your own? Do you learn the best from digital video and self-paced courses you've taken in the past or training programs you've done at your job? Do you work better in a group setting with other people around you where you can discuss your ideas? Do you usually learn the most from live instruction, one-on-one tutoring, whatever your experience has been like in the past with those kinds of things, or maybe some combination of those modalities? So you just want to do a little bit of thinking about it. You can just pause the episode and think about that for a moment if you want. And I think it's really important because no one wants to be studying for this thing longer than necessary. And while there might be some programs out there that are really good fit for other folks, they might not be the best fit for you. And that was definitely the situation I was in. And so a little bit of reflection up front can really, really help with that. So that's the first step, is just thinking about your learning style. And it doesn't need to be a perfect judgment. It just needs to be reasonably good. Okay, then we'll talk about your desired gain, your budget, and your timeline. And all these things interact in the following way. So let's start with free. Some of you have no option except to use free resources. That's super understandable. I've been in difficult financial positions in my career, and you do what you got to do. You want to focus on your resourcefulness and initiative, not necessarily your resources. Those are the things that are going to have the biggest impact on your success in this arena. And that's a beautiful thing, I think. We do have an episode called Study Plan, and that'll really, really help you out with a free study plan if you want to get a good structure together. And then you can go from there. I've given you plenty of options for customizing that in the episode itself, and we'll link that in the description of this content as well below. For now, if you do need to go the free route, there's a couple different options out there. You can try to go to a library and get some used books. That can be a really, really good way to go for free. And then there's also quite a bit of content that's been put out on YouTube recently that a lot of people have had success with on using as a free program. And both of those things can work. Again, that's why I'm telling you to reflect on your learning style and think about what's going to be best for you. But the thing about YouTube is you do just need to be a little bit careful with that because there's just a lot of noise on YouTube. Like there's the whole machine learning algorithm itself that's like constantly trying to keep you on the platform by showing you really cool stuff that might not have to do with the GMAT. And then of course there's people who are just really, really good at YouTube, but not really good at the GMAT. And you got to be really careful with those folks because as a student, it's almost impossible to tell who's who. Yeah, but I can tell you like promises of very short, specific timelines on specific scores, like I would just be skeptical of it. I'm not saying those people are wrong. I'm definitely not saying they're bad people. They probably are telling the truth about their experience, but it's just something that you want to calibrate because there's just a huge variety of different types of people and studiers in this place, and you want to make sure that you're getting the best advice for you personally. And that's why I'm making this for you right now, just to kind of counteract some of the noise that's out there. Okay. So the other thing is like with free programs, it can be hard to get your questions answered. There's definitely places you can go to get them answered, like forums, for example. And it's awesome that all that stuff exists and that people are willing to give their advice there. But that advice is generally biased. It's either biased by their specific situation, or it's biased by the fact that this is like a representative of a certain company who's like wants you to believe certain things that they believe. And again, I'm not saying that's good or bad. You just want to go into it eyes wide open and knowing that those are some of the reasons that free programs tend to take a long time. It tends to take longer to do it for free than it does if you can invest some resources, financial resources into the process. Now, I'm not trying to tell you to invest financial resources. I'm just telling you what I wish I knew at the beginning. So again, there's going to be a wide variety of people. Some of you are going to study with free stuff for 2 weeks and you're going to hit your target score or higher. And that's amazing. That's the best news ever. Some of you are going to grind it out for a year and be in a worse position than where you started. And then there's going to be a lot of us in between. And all of that happens every single year. It's totally normal. And I just want you to have realistic expectations so you can make a good plan and get this done as fast as possible. If you need to do it for free and it is going to take a long time, maybe that is still the fastest possible route that you can be on. So you got to let go of the self-judgment at some point because that's not helping your results. And instead, you just want to focus on, okay, what do I need to personally do to get where I want to go from where I am? That's the important message here, okay? So we did a pretty big study here, and we collected about 10,000 data points. And what we saw from free programs is you're looking at about 6 hours of study for each 1 point gain you want to see on your overall score. Okay, so if you want to make a 100-point gain from 555 to 655, you should plan for around 600 hours. Now, I want to be super clear. That's not a guarantee. These are just averages. You might be way faster than that. You might be way slower than that. You might be a total outlier as far as our data goes. I'm just sharing what I've seen from doing this for a really, really, really long time and doing like some serious hardcore analysis of this stuff. So make of that what you will. Obviously, you want to be on the faster side. I'm going to do everything I can in this episode to help you be on the faster side of that. But it's just good to kind of look at your weekly study hours, see if you can build that up, because every additional study hour that you get in on a weekly basis, especially if you're doing a free program, that's going to compound over the course of your study, and that can really bring down the number of weeks and months that you need to make this happen. And for most of us, we want to get it done as soon as possible with a great result, obviously. But outside of that, there's a lot of other cool stuff you can do with your life that's not studying for the GMAT. Not that it's not cool, but just saying, why make this longer than it needs to be? That's how I think about it. So if you need more advice on free programs than what's out there, then again, feel free to get in touch with us. We're at the GMAT Strategy on current social channels. If you like to DM, contact at the GMAT Strategy. If you want to email, contact at the gmatstrategy.com, excuse me. There's tons of free plans out there. I haven't found one that I've found satisfactory, personally. I just think they all have major problems. They all reflect like some major biases of the people who created them. And I've been in the industry long enough to know a little bit about these people. And I'm not saying they're good or bad people. I want to be really, really clear about that. They're definitely trying their best. But I just don't think they're right. That's my opinion. And so that's why we made our study plan episode. And just give you a little bit of perspective on that. Like, if you hear anybody talking in terms of like weeks, months that you need to study, like that's totally unrealistic. If you're studying 2 hours a week, there's no way that it's going to take you just as long as someone who's studying 20 hours a week. I mean, unless the talent differential is like perfectly on on par with that difference. Hopefully, you can understand why I'm talking in terms of hours and not talking in terms of weeks or months. So just again, be really, really skeptical of that. Like, people sell a lot of GMAT prep on the back of, certain like weeks or months type stuff. I'm not saying don't buy stuff. We'll talk about why it can be a really good idea to buy stuff in a second. I'm just saying go into this situation as an informed decision maker. There's a lot riding on this. This isn't like just buying a pair of socks or buying your next car, even as big of an investment as that might seem. We're talking about the whole rest of your career here, everybody. So let's really try to do this the right way to the best of our abilities. Okay, so up the sort of cost sphere, but also up on the efficiency curve would be books that you're going to pay for. So most printed books in the GMAT space are going to be somewhere in the 100 to 300 US dollar range, give or take. And we've seen from the data collection that on average, that'll save you about 1 hour of study for each 1 point gain you want to make versus free resources. So on average, it's about 5 hours of study for each 1 point gain with the books. So if I want to go from 555 to 655, I'm looking at 500 hours instead of 600 hours. So again, these are just averages. They're not guarantees. This is just what we've seen. We've scraped a ton of sources, and this is what we got. So what are you doing here? How do you think about this as an investment? Well, you're buying back hours into your life. Here you're buying about 100 hours back on average, again, and that costs about $200. So let's figure that's about $2 an hour. You're paying yourself $2 an hour to make that bet. And if you make less than $2 an hour at work, that's probably a bad bargain. Like, you can take that time, work more, earn $1.50 an hour, and then save your money, get some free books, or do the YouTube thing like I was talking about. And that's probably a very rational decision. Now, if you make more than $2 an hour at work, then I think it's a great investment. The best books, in my opinion, are the Manhattan books. Those are the ones I've had the most success with. They're definitely not perfect. I want to be clear about that. But gauged against the other books that I've used and seen, I think that's pretty much the best bang for the buck. I'm not saying there aren't good providers out there or other good books out there that can work for you, but I just haven't seen the same results, both from working with people myself and also from just like observing thousands and thousands of posts about the GMAT over the years on the internet and collecting that data. So yeah, I don't have any brand partnerships with anyone in the space. TGS, our company, doesn't have any brand partnerships with anyone in the space. We tried to be nice and reach out to people and see if we could partner on things, and everybody was pretty mean, if you can believe that. So so I guess the good part about that is the advice that I can give is unbiased here. So yeah, that is what it is. It's just giving you the truth here, guys. So up the cost sphere from books, you've got digital self-paced courses. So we got free, we got books, digital self-paced. These digital self-paced courses are usually within the 300 to 1,000 range USD, something like that. Some can definitely go higher. You might be able to get some lower if there's some promotions, but it's around that. Some bill monthly, some are a flat rate for a certain like period of access. So that's essentially the same as billing monthly. And what we've seen here is about 4 hours of study for each 1 point gain you want to make on your overall score. So it's definitely a nice bump for the money in most situations. If you're going from 555 to 655, you figure maybe that's about 400 hours of study. Now, again, just averages. Plenty of people out there are going to dispute my claims. It looks like they're just giving their opinion to me. That's what I've seen. Haven't seen the data. And they're entitled to their opinions. That is what it is. But what you're getting with these digital self-paced providers is you're getting structure, you're getting organization. Some of you might learn better from video or from just a course where you can log in and you don't have to think too much about what you're doing. You don't have to remember where you are in the book. The software just remembers where you are in the program. There's a lot of value there. So for folks like yourself, that can be a good bet. There's a lot of overlap between material of different providers, and there's also some differentiators. But I think at the end of the day, it's really just about picking the brand that resonates with you if you're going to go this route. This is where you've got brands like Magoosh, Target Test Prep, GMAT. Those are some of the most reputable. But there's a lot of people kind of starting up in the space there, and there's some AI empowered platforms, those kinds of things. At the end of the day, though, you just want to know you're buying software. That's what you're buying. And if that's the route that you want to go, then you can do a little bit of research. You can do some free trials, and you can make the bet that you want. So let's talk about the upside here. Just based on our data, you're buying back about 200 hours of life versus free with this path. So let's call the average investment here like $800 just to keep the math kind of clean for you so you can make a comparison. You're buying back time now at the rate of $8 an hour. So now you're buying an extra 100 hours for $800. Again, if you make less than $8 an hour, that might not be a good bet. If you make more than $8 an hour, it's probably a good time saver versus free. It's like what I'm trying to say is it's like a rational bet, a reasonable investment. But again, these are not guarantees. You might be way slower than that. You might be way faster than that. You might buy a promotion that turns out to be a crappy provider. I'll give a little bit of advice on that in a second. But I'm even having trouble keeping track of all the softwares in the space these days. So I'm just going to give you like a broad overview and a good idea so you can make an informed decision. Again, that's what I'm trying to help you with here. So if you need the absolute cheapest option, but you don't need to go free and you want a platform that has video-based lessons and like some structure, then Magoosh is usually a good bet at the low cost of the sphere. If you need more help on the quant side, I think that's where the Target Test Prep program really shines. And if you need more help on verbal, I think that's where eGMAT is generally a good fit, especially if you're an English language learner or English is your second language. So it's hard to make perfect recommendations in this space. I'll talk more about that in a sec. But those have been the main recommendations that I think have stood up over time in my experience. Yeah, just quickly to touch on the whole like buying software thing. I mean, software businesses and platform business models, as a lot of you may be aware, since you're really high level business people, software businesses and platforms have really high margins. And so they have, there's a lot of players in the space. It's a very attractive business model. A lot of people are going after it. It's a low barrier for entry because there's no like regulatory body that governs GMAT prep and says what's good and bad. And so you're going to hear from these people a lot. Basically, like they advertise heavily. It's a very advertising heavy space in that regard because they have a lot of margin to do it, and then the customer acquisition cost is quite low, and then you're incentivized to sell a lot of units. And this is like basic economics for a lot of you, but a lot of you maybe aren't familiar with how that stuff works. And so that's neither good nor bad. I'm not saying that either makes it a fit for you or does not make it a fit for you. I'm certainly not saying whether these are good or bad people doing this. I think they're just people running businesses. Kind of makes sense if you step back and think about it. And different people have different beliefs about what's right and wrong. And that we're not really here to comment on that. I'm just here to help you with the GMAT. But I just want you to go in with eyes wide open and just know that it's easy to make wrong bets in that space just because advertising really works. Like, just remember a couple things about advertising in general, everybody. Number one, it's usually based on best case scenarios. Not saying it's not true. I'm just saying it's probably a best case scenario if you're seeing it in an ad. And number two, advertising works super well. That's why the FTC exists. That's why advertising itself is heavily regulated regardless of industry. You got to be really, really careful what you tell people because advertising works super, super well. Like we all, and it's just another conversation. I'm going to just gloss over that. But the reason I'm bringing this up is there's a lot of paid placements in the industry, meaning people paying to make organic content, like blog articles or video reviews or things that look like organic user-generated content, that kind of thing. And so I'm not saying don't pay attention to it. I'm just saying that it's a game that's being played for your attention, and not everyone is playing fairly, and not everybody is playing by a strict code of ethics, everybody. So just judge everyone based on the results that they can provide for you. Okay? Try their stuff. Test their advice out. Do the same with me. Take the advice I'm giving you here and test it out. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. So far, I'm not saying I'm right 100% of the time, but so far, my track record's pretty good. So I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm definitely not. I'm human just like you. But I am trying my best. I've been doing this for a long time. And if my advice isn't working for you, then don't listen to me. Okay. And if someone else's advice is working better for you, then definitely listen to them. Like I said, this is your whole career. I'm here to make you more successful. If that means paying attention to me, great. If it means paying attention to someone else, that's totally cool too. But what I'm saying is, you're going to have to do a little bit of more diligence in this space because it's just such a crowded space and there's so many claims being made and it's just really, really hard to tell who's legit and who's not. So do as much research as you can, but recognize that you might make a bad bet. And this comes back to something I mentioned earlier. I actually picked two bad providers, if you can believe that, before, and both lowered my score, just for the record. My score went down working with them before I figured out what was really going on. And it was just really, really hard to tell that difference in advance. It was only clear in hindsight. And that's why I started the podcast in the first place. Not the only reason, but one of the reasons, is because there was no source of truth in the space that I could have gone to at that time to get around that bad set of decisions that I made. So that's what I'm doing my best to do here. Like I said, I'm human. I'm not perfect. Plenty of people hate me. Like that's on them. Not going to try to control how people feel about me. But I am trying to do my best. I'm trying to help everybody out in the space as much as possible. Like I said, if you do hate me, I probably reached out to you and probably tried to help you out. So yeah, it doesn't really need to be commented on more than that. So for all of you in the process, just spend a little bit of time making your decision about your provider, and don't worry about making a perfect decision. You just want to get in motion, and then just after you've gained a little bit more experience, collected some data, and maybe even gone through their program, try to practice test and see, are you really on the right track? I think that's really the best measure, rather than just somebody's opinion, even my opinion. Even if it's a very well-informed opinion, it still is just my opinion at the end of the day, like I said earlier. If you're in a situation where you do need to switch providers, it's definitely painful. Like I said, I went through it a couple times. It sucks. But that's why I was talking about resourcefulness and initiative, just making sure that you're leaning on that. Because at the end of the day, you definitely can figure this out. In fact, we've got an episode on how to switch providers called How to Switch GMAT Providers, just something I wish I knew back in the day when I was in your shoes. It's definitely a tough situation, but like I said, it's super, super common, and it's just the reality of the situation that we find all of ourselves in starting off on the GMAT journey, where there's just a lot of really compelling people, and it's hard to know who's legit. This is really hard. Okay, so that's that. I gave my advice. I gave the providers who I think you'll probably have the best experiences with, depending on your situation. So let's talk about live classes. So now we're moving up the cost sphere a little bit, and then we're also moving up the efficiency sphere on average. Okay, if you're a really self-paced, video-based learner and you try a live class, that's probably going to be worse for you, okay, if that's not already obvious. But what we've seen is most live classes are somewhere in the 1,000 to 2,000 US dollar range, give or take. And this is about 3 hours of study for each 1 point gain you want to make on your overall score. So again, you're buying back about 100 hours, and we'll do the math on that in a second. So you get a live instructor, you get to ask questions, you can interrupt the lesson to get clarity on things. And yeah, maybe you even get some support outside of class, but just check with your instructor before you buy, because some people are generous with that and some people aren't. So let's do the math. 555 to 655, 100 point gain or so. You're looking at about 300 hours. And again, just could be way more or way less. Just want to be clear about that, as clear as possible. But if you figure about 1,500 USD on average, 1,500, now you're buying back time at about $15 an hour. So if you make more than that, that's usually a good bet. If you make less than that, then you're probably economically better off just using a lower cost option and just planning for a slightly longer timeline. Hopefully you beat that timeline, like I said. But just look at a lot of the reviews and success stories and posts online, and I think you'll see these numbers are they're not perfect. They're not perfect, but they're in the ballpark. So usually the people who are going to have the best experience with live classes is if you're that live experience learner. That's why I led off with the learning style thing. I think that really is huge. You might like the accountability of the live class, like it's scheduled every week. If you miss it, you're like, crap, can't miss this class. If you like having that accountability of like, I got to get my work done, that can be a lot of value there. And I think if you're going for a live class, I'd recommend Test Crackers. They're a smaller brand. They're local to the San Francisco Bay Area, but they still do online work. Um, yeah, they're not into the like slick marketing website or anything like that, but they are really good teachers. That's what I like about them, and they're good people. You do get more personalized attention versus some of the larger brand options with Test Crackers, but if you are that kind of larger brand shopper, that's totally cool. There's all kinds of different people in a market. But I just personally don't have a favorite big brand provider when it comes to live classes. I think they all have different problems depending on who it is. And yeah, so that's why I recommend the smaller brand thing if you're comfortable with that. But if you're not comfortable with it, then it's not that you're definitely going to have a bad experience with another provider. It's more just about going into it with eyes wide open and like thinking about making the decision based on, again, from a place of being informed. I think that's probably everything we need to say about the live classes. But again, if you have questions about that, let us know. At the highest end of the cost sphere, you've got private tutoring. This is one-on-one, and here there's a really big range of pricing. Usually, it's going to be somewhere in the 2,000 to 10,000 US range for a full program, start to finish. For sure, you can get less expensive programs, and you can get hourly services for a lot less than $2,000. But I'm talking about like a full program where you're really going to benefit from everything that the tutor can do for you. We're definitely going to be pricing some folks out here, but it's generally going to be the fastest route to your result. The data bears that out, but also just if you think about it, it makes sense. Like it's a fully customized program based around your specific strengths and weaknesses. It's a higher touch experience. You can work much more on the things you personally need work on and much less on the things that you're already good at. It's not like a one size fits all cookie cutter big box approach. That's obviously really scalable from a business perspective. But it's not necessarily the fastest from a consumer perspective. So that's part of this price efficiency trade-off that I'm talking about here. And I'll just say one last time, I can't say that investing more is going to speed up your results. I'm just saying on average, you tend to see that borne out over large data sets. Okay, I do want to be really, really clear about that. Now, a lot of people end up going for tutoring if they've tried a less expensive option and then haven't had success. That can definitely work too. So if you're in that situation where you want to just you have the time to make a gamble and you're like, let me try out one of these programs that seems interesting to me. I'm kind of curious. How far can I get on my own? And then maybe I'll engage with a more robust program later, a more specific program later. That can work too. But if you're in a situation where you're on a really tight timeline and time is the scarce resource and money is the comparatively more abundant resource, then this is typically a really good place to go. And it's probably good to just start shopping with tutors, interview a few people, and see who you resonate with best. I'm not going to recommend any specific tutors because they come and go like you just honestly would not believe. And even from year to year, there's a lot of tutors who used to be good and they just fall off. It's honestly crazy to see. Um, and then there's people who used to be bad who like kind of had a change of heart or they realized they needed to work a little harder or something and now they're great. So the best advice that I can give you here is to talk to your personal network. See if you can get referrals from people who are close to you and see if you can get up to 3 referrals. Sorry, at least 3 referrals. And what I mean by that, sorry, it's very unclear the way I'm saying this. Talk to your network, get as many referrals as you can, talk to as many people in your network as you can. But as soon as you have a list of 3 potential providers, that's usually a good place where you can start talking to these people. Most of them will do a quick free consult with you. Some of them will do longer, more in-depth consults for free. It's definitely a large project, and there's a lot at stake here. So you just want to have someone who has a strong track record of success, and ideally someone you resonate with personally. You're generally going to learn more from someone you resonate with personally, but the technical skill set is the most important thing. The results of being part of that technical skill set. So even if you're working with someone who maybe is not going to be your best buddy, but they're really good at tutoring people for the GMAT and helping you learn, then that's a pretty safe bet. Again, I talked about the admissions consultant thing. That's one data point that you can use. So if you have an admissions consultant, ask them who they recommend. But just take that with a grain of salt, especially if they have a paid referral partnership there. So what is important to say about tutoring? So here we're getting into the the 2 hours of study for each 1 point gain range. Now, these are just averages, and there was a lot of noise in the data set here because you have a lot of people doing like 1 or 2 tutoring sessions with someone and then either getting really crazy good results or getting like no results. And so here we threw out some of that like hourly data and we just focused on people who actually did like at least 5 hours with a tutor. And that's where you get into that 2 hours of study for each 1 point gain. And perhaps obviously the more time you spend with your provider generally, the better you're going to perform from an efficiency and a score perspective. And that's, of course, assuming you pick someone good and like you do get a good referral. But just quickly on that, if you don't know anybody else who's gone through this process or you're having trouble getting referrals from people, just reach out to us, shoot us a DM or an email, and we'll ask you a little bit more about your situation and we'll make sure you're set up with the right person. And it's just a lot more current that way because even the platforms that recommend tutors come and go like crazy. And it's just like it's just like really interesting to think about the past couple decades doing this. So yeah, that's there for you if you want it. But again, like the personal referrals, usually those people are going to know you better than we're going to know you. But if you're striking out there, I just want you to have an option, okay? So back to the efficiency. Here on a 100 point gain, you're looking at maybe 200 hours, give or take. If you can get with someone who's really great, it again could be way more, but it's a reasonable bet. And let's say just on average, you're going to drop 3,000 on that. So 3,000 for another 100 hours back into your life. Now you're buying back time at a rate of $30 an hour. So you can see the cost increase is generally not linear. And neither are the efficiency gains. The efficiency gains are exponential, costs are exponential, kind of makes sense if you step back and think about it. If you're making more than $30 an hour, usually it's a good bet. But again, if you're not that one-on-one tutoring type of learner, then you might favor one of the less expensive options, and that might be even more efficient for you. So just, again, trying to help you think through this, make an informed decision as it is like theoretically a large investment. So if you think about the upside and just do the math, I'm not going to quote too much math here, but I would say maybe just look into your target programs like average exit salaries and then maybe assume like a 5% per year raise of like growth in that or something over the next 20 years. That gets you a good like kind of total gain number that you can look at. You might even have more specific data for your industry and the industry you want to go into. And you can run a little bit of numbers there, make a simple model. That's a place where some Gen AI can be really helpful. Actually, they can help you build a financial model in like 5 seconds, especially if you don't have any modeling experience. It's quite helpful. But if you have extensive modeling experience, you've probably already done this math. But just helping you try to think through it from a bigger perspective. I mean, top schools, you're looking at millions of extra earnings on average. Again, can't guarantee that's going to be you. Still, you got to like be a good person, work hard, all that stuff. But since all of you, well, not all of you, since the vast, vast majority of you are amazing people and you work super hard and you're always going the extra mile for your company, whether you get credit or not, like that's going to be a non-issue for all of you. And you just need the degree and the credential and the skill set to get to the next level, which is very admirable. So yeah, I think on average, across like the top 100 business schools in the US, it's about $3 million a year, total extra earnings over the lifetime. And as you get up the ranking sphere, it's quite a bit more. I think maybe tops out around an extra 18 million across the course of your career, something like that. So those are just averages, obviously really big, sexy numbers. So just take those with a grain of salt as well. And just make sure you're doing the basics well. But, that can be a place that you could make a $2,000, $5,000, $7,000 investment. It just starts to make a little bit more sense, I think, when you think about it from that perspective, because I think there's a little bit of sticker shock there. Like, whoa, $7,000, I was expecting to spend $70 on some books. And hopefully you don't have to do that. But if you are that person who's more time constrained, or you've been working on this for a while and you're not seeing the results you want, that's where some really high quality one-on-one instruction could be just an absolute game changer, man. You can see all kinds of success stories getting turned around. So that's the basic rundown of providers in the space. If you're unsure how to make the decision, like I said, feel free to reach out to us. We'll ask you a few questions about your situation, try to get you some good advice. But if you feel like you're already clear on how you want to move forward there, then by all means go for it. And then just know, like, if you need to switch partway through, that's not the end of the world. Obviously, it's not ideal. Hopefully you make the right bet from the beginning, but happens all the time, and don't be afraid to switch it up if you're not seeing results. So now you've got your baseline score, you've got your provider. What do you do now? Basically, my advice is put your head down, block out the noise, and just do what your chosen provider tells you to do. Just be careful with social media, be careful with forums. There's a lot of really well-meaning people there. There's a lot of experts, but there's also a lot of inexperienced people there, just kind of giving you their opinion. And a lot of times it's quite uninformed. They haven't had success with the exam. There's also a lot of dishonesty on social media, as much as I hate to say it. So just, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not saying there isn't any value there. Sometimes the best value is just knowing other people are struggling with the process, if you're struggling with the process. And there's also a lot of value in making contributions to those forums. If you have learned things that have worked really well for you, then by all means, I encourage you to share that stuff. But every year, through some way, shape, or form, I find people posting who are not telling the truth. And they're making claims about their own scores and their own results that are not necessarily true. Like they're combining all the best scores from their practice exams and pretending that's like an official score, or like posting pictures of practice exams and making it seem like it's an official score. It's just weird. And like, who knows why people do the things that they do? It's a big question, obviously. So I'm not saying there's no value in those places. I'm just saying, just take it with a grain of salt. Everything you read on there might not be the ground truth. Okay. And I wish someone had been a little more heavy-handed with that advice with me back in the day. So yeah, just engage with them appropriately. Let's put it that way, because what can happen, and what I've seen a lot, is people get with a good provider, it's a good fit for them, they're going down the path, they're having success, and then they read some article online and they start to change their approach, and all of a sudden that creates like tons and tons and tons of problems. So I'm just going to encourage you to not do that. If you need the mental, physical, emotional support from having people on your team, then that's probably the best way to use those. But if you find yourself getting really distracted, pulled off course, not taking your provider's advice, that's kind of like burning money, buying a program to get advice and then not taking the advice. I just wouldn't recommend that. But it happens all the time, and sometimes it happens subconsciously. And so I'm just letting you know it happened to me. It happens to people every single year. And if you do get off track, just do your best to get back on track as quickly as possible, and you should have success. Let's see, I think that's everything we need there. So again, it's very simple. Once you pick the provider, and that's why I spent so much time talking about different providers, once you make that selection, you're going to just give them a lot of trust. You're going to take their advice and go as far as you can with just that advice. You're going to try to block out the noise. I know that more is better in a lot of situations, but with GMAT advice, I have found that not to be true. Usually just a little bit of high quality advice from the right sources, that's the way to go. And the rest is just really counterproductive in most situations. Okay, so that's that. Now, as part of most curricula, you'll be recommended as to when to take your next practice exam, and I encourage you to take your provider's advice on that. If you're unsure, then when you complete the program, just take a practice exam. And if your score's not moving, that's not good. And there's kind of two thoughts you want to have there. Number one, it could be your provider's fault. Maybe it's just not a fit. Maybe they just told you the wrong thing. Maybe you had a miscommunication with them, whatever. And that's one possibility. The other possibility is you're not executing well enough. And you want to be really honest with yourself about that, because maybe you have the right provider and maybe you're not taking their advice enough. Maybe you took the advice and they're just not, the advice is not the right advice for you. And the way you can tell that really clearly is auditing your own execution. That's the thing that you have the most control over and the most knowledge of. If you're executing on their advice really well and you're not seeing the results you want or not seeing them fast enough, that's not good. That's definitely a time to consider switching things up. But if you went through the program, but you didn't deploy the advice, you didn't execute well on their advice, that is also a huge problem, and that's a very fixable problem. Just execute well on their advice and then try the exam again. And then if you're seeing positive results, that's your answer. Okay, so it's a very, very simple decision there. And yeah, honesty with ourselves is the biggest asset that we can have on this particular path. It's generally a good asset. If you don't know what really good execution looks like, or you just struggle to execute well in general, there's plenty of us out there. That was me when I was a young kid. Like, I had big ambitions, but I was not a great executor. I had to learn a lot of basic things that a lot of other people take for granted. And as a result of that, like I have a lot of tools that I can help you with. So we've got episodes on how to be more consistent linked for you below, and we've got episodes on how to be more disciplined. And that's stuff that I've used to great extent myself and with tons of clients over the years. And if that's you and you want help with that, I'd encourage you to check that out. If you're a great executor, then you should be good. Okay, so at that point, after you've audited the execution and assuming you're seeing good results, you want to review the exam and note the areas for improvement. And a good, simple framework for this is just pick the top three that you think are going to have the biggest effect, and then just go really, really deep on those three topics. If it's timing, then do a lot of timing practice. If it's data sufficiency, do a lot of data sufficiency practice. If it's graphs and tables, do a lot of graphs and tables practice. And usually what you want to do is go back to the original source you learned from, make sure you've got all the technique in a good place for those question types, and then do a lot of questions, ideally from the official guide, if you can afford it. But if it's just free problems online, that can definitely work. It's just a little bit slower, like I was telling you, and that's just by the numbers. That's not like me hating on free resources or something like that. It just, the data's there. So at that point, the reason I'm recommending just picking three is a lot of us, going back to the perfectionism and obsession thing, a lot of us want to get better at everything right now all the time. And that's like a really good instinct and like positive character trait that you're expressing there. But it's a little counterproductive. If you spread yourself too thin across too many areas of prep, I've just really seen that end badly. So if you're working with a provider who gives you advice about how to review your exams and a structured system for reviewing and profiting from those exams, then follow that. But if you're not in that situation, like you're one of the people who has to do it for free, then just picking a top three, focusing only on those three and just maintaining everything else through light review, that tends to work really, really well. And when I see people try to get better at more than three things at a time, it usually just ends up in them spinning their wheels and being stuck and not really improving any of them. And that's really sad because these are really hardworking, really awesome people. They'd be great leaders, like super ethical, super inspiring, like super intelligent. Like you would want to hire them if you ran a business, basically. And it's not an effort problem in those situations. That's what I'm trying to help with. I'm trying to help you with the strategy side, like making good bets. So that's basically everything that you need to do there. And then you'll just retest to assess your progress on those three areas in particular. And if you've moved the needle on those three areas, the score should move positively as well. And then you can repeat that cycle. You can pick a new top three that you think are going to move the most, and then you can go from there. And I've got a lot more advice on that in the study plan episode if you want it. But that's just the basic frameworks, okay? So you're going to learn a little bit about the individual questions, or you're just going to jump in cold if you've got the guts to do that. Highly recommend it if you can. And then once you've got that cold baseline, you're going to assess yourself against your target program's median score. You're going to look at the individual quant, individual verbal, and individual data insight scores, compare where you are versus 78. And I'm not talking about percentiles there. The percentiles in quant are super deflated. The percentiles in verbal are super inflated. It doesn't really matter why that's happening. That's been happening for 20 years. So the percentiles are not telling you the truth. You got to look at the subscores themselves and think about, okay, where am I versus 78? If I'm already at an 80 in quant, maybe it's going to be super easy for me to get another 5 points out of there, but maybe it's a better idea for me to invest in my verbal skills and maybe not touch quant at all. Maybe an 80 is good enough for me to hit my goal score. And again, those score calculators out there, just a quick web search, that'll help you find some of those. And you can do the math on which individual subscores you need to hit the overall 3-digit score that you're gunning for, that the schools are generally going to publish, okay? But if you're way above 78, probably less of a priority on that baseline test. If you're way below 78, much bigger priority in terms of the materials that you're going to want to learn and the strength of the program that you want to choose. Okay, so a few quick parting tips to help you accelerate your progress here. Number one, highly recommend using the official guide materials as much as possible. It's very, very helpful, particularly in the verbal section. It's really hard to simulate the questions that the exam writers create. And that's why I'm recommending starting with the MBA.com test as your baseline. Definitely would not trust any other baselines out there other than MBA.com. But there are third-party practice exams out there that you can use in the middle of your prep. I just wouldn't do that as the cold baseline. You want the cleanest data you can get from the beginning. And then also that's why I recommended the official starter kit if you're just getting going, so you can see what real official questions look like rather than engaging with some simulated questions. Not that they're bad simulations, but it's at the end of the day, it's not the real thing. So in the middle of your prep, again, that's where some simulated questions might be more valuable. But if you can get into a program where you can use official guide materials as much as possible, that's generally a really, really good bet, and that'll save you time. Tip number two, focus on high quality scratch work, meaning what you're writing on your paper as you're doing the problem on the computer. GMAT's on a computer, there's no calculator. In the quant section, there is one in the DI section, but that's on the computer screen as well. And all your like figuring and mathing and solving and note taking is going to happen on a physical piece of paper. And so you want to be thoughtful about how organized you're being on that paper, even though there's significant time pressure during the exam. And you'll hear me talk about that a lot if you go through our Math Basics series, or if you go through any of our real GMAT problem series where we're talking through real past problems from real GMAT exams together. And I'm giving you advice on what I recommend there. You'll hear me talk about high quality scratch work a lot. And it's something most people don't think about at all. It just seems totally irrelevant. Like, what is this guy talking about what I write on my paper? Is he crazy? Like, I just got to know how to do math, man. What's wrong with you? You know? And that's how I thought. That is exactly how I thought at the beginning of this process. I definitely was not concerned with how organized my scrap paper was during questions. And that cost me a lot of time, everybody. Again, can't say it's going to be the same for you. Just highly recommend being thoughtful about it. A good benchmark for that is, can someone else tell how you thought through the problem just from looking at what you wrote down? If you can get to there, you're not going to miss very many questions that you know how to do on test day, which is really the name of the game here. Also, if you get a physical book, don't be writing in the book. Use a separate piece of paper. That's not realistic to write on problems or underline things in verbal questions. You're not going to be able to do that on the real test. Okay, last tip. Just keep a list of questions that you want to come back and revisit. Either questions that have interesting concepts, things you hadn't seen before, tricks, traps, things you fell into. And I'd recommend just resolving them on a regular basis. Yeah, if you're just logging them, but you're not coming back to them on a regular basis, I haven't found value in that. I think it's a waste of time. If you're going to log them, just schedule some time to regularly review them. And a lot of programs will help you with that, and like have that structure built in. So definitely do that. It'll help a lot. I think in general, just like the scratch work thing, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you're starting out to be like, why would I solve a problem that I've already done? But that's how you develop speed and how you develop good pattern recognition. And a lot of what's going to be on your official GMAT is stuff that's very similar. It's not going to be the same, but it's going to be quite similar to the stuff you're going to see in practice, especially if you use the official materials from MBA.com. And that will really, really help you recognize what to do and avoid the kind of deer in the headlights effect where you just freeze on questions. It's not that that's never going to happen, and different people have different levels of anxiety on the exam, and that's really a whole other topic and a very serious topic. If you're struggling with that, I would encourage you to meet it head on. We've got an episode on test anxiety. There's tons of other resources out there for you if you want to engage with those as well. And having said that, one way that you can get ahead of that is resolving questions that you've seen before. So if you want a simple recommendation, 5 to 10 per day as a warm-up is great. That can take you super, super far. And if you need more advice on that, like I said, gave you our contact information, feel free to reach out anytime. But that's how you start. That's how you start studying for the GMAT from a very, very deeply informed perspective. That's the big picture. I've given you some options for getting some more detailed information if you want that. And I've also given you kind of the quick start guide. If you want to just run with it and go from here, by all means, do it. We're going to fill in more details and more content in the future as we go. We're really committed to helping everyone in this process for as long as we can. And for as free as long as we can as well. And just let us know if there are specific things that you're struggling with, and we'll do our best to address it in future pieces of content that we create for everybody. As always, my greatest hope is that this material is going to make your studies as easy and as painless as they can possibly be. If you want more tips and strategies for optimizing your performance on the exam, just head to the website I mentioned earlier. It's the gmatstrategy.com. It's linked to the description of this content if you want to click instead of typing it into your browser. And like I said, highly recommend our video on how to reach your dream GMAT score in half the normal time. In the meantime, this is a regular show, so if you like it, please subscribe. And no matter what, even if you don't like the show, please stay positive and please stay consistent with your studies. All of you have amazing value to offer the world and the business community at large. And I'm just excited to hopefully make even a very, very small contribution to that today. Hopefully it's a big contribution. And I wish you all the best. Talk soon.